Okay, rock stars, now we're going to move on to the properties of matter. And if you go to the very beginning of your science notebook, we made that graphic organizer that kind of looks at both of the properties of matter. We have observable characteristics and we have measurable characteristics. So remember, the observable characteristics or properties of matter were simply things that we observe with our five senses. Anything beyond an observation, okay, and it has to be with one of the five senses. It can't be an inference. Remember, we worked a lot on that, would be measurable. Okay, and we had three measurable characteristics that you guys worked on. You had those stations in guided reading where you practiced all of these things, and we talked about how math is all part of science, and that is mass, volume, and density. Okay, so these are the measurable characteristics. And then we have the observable, which are pretty basic. You just have the five senses. So here are a couple things I want you to do right now. Number one, you need to find a way to put these onto your poster, but you also need to make sure you define these three things here. Okay, and I just do not want a definition that's straight out of your notebook. I want something that you make up that has a real-life example. Okay, so you could choose anything. You could take, a pencil that's on your desk and think about these three properties, okay, these three measurable properties with that pencil. So pause the video right now because I am going to come back and talk about these three really quickly to make sure that you have these down. Okay, guys, so mass, volume, and density. These are properties of matter. They're measurable. They have to be measured with some type of object or, measuring device or something like that. So mass, we know that matter is anything that has mass and takes up space, which is matter is anything that has mass and volume. Those are those two things here, but we need to make sure we know what those are. So mass is simply how much matter is in an object. Okay, so we talked about how in outer space, our mass would be the same as it is here on Earth, but our weight would be different. Okay, so mass is how much matter is in an object. So if I drew for you a box that has, this is my piece of matter, and if it had this many molecules in it, and if I filled that whole thing in, that would be its mass. How much matter is in an object? Okay, pretty straightforward. Now, volume, you guys worked with water displacement during guided reading. You took the huge graduated cylinders, you filled them with 500 milliliters of water, and you dropped objects in, and then you found the difference after you read that graduated cylinder a second time. So that's actually the volume, because the volume is how much space something takes up. We're going to be spending considerable time in math on volume later this year. So, if I have this marker and I dropped it into a cup of water and I measured how much space the water took up at the beginning and how much it took up after the marker is inside of it, find the difference between those two numbers, and I have my volume. So volume is how much space something takes up. So matter is anything that has mass, okay, and takes up space, volume. And then finally, density is always that tough one, but if you remember, I had a few of you come up to the room, and I boxed off an area on the floor, and I said, okay, that is, all these little dots represents one of your classmates, okay? And that's the mass, how much matters in an object. Density is how tightly packed the molecules are in a substance or in matter, okay? So if I had that same box, okay, and if there was simply 3 molecules or 4 molecules in that box, those are not very tightly packed. That would probably float if I put it into water. And if I took a rock and put it into a thing of water, those molecules are much more tightly packed, so it would sink to the bottom. So its density is greater than that of the water. Okay, so make sure you have these 3 terms down. Practice, practice, practice. Now actually I do not have a page for this for you, but what I want you to do on your poster, okay, is to find a way to make this clear to your class, to the students who you will be showing this poster to. Okay, so I'm not interested in just definitions out of your notebook. Find some creative way to go about that. The big thing, though, is the properties of matter, observable, measurable. 5 senses, things we have to use tools for, including mass, density, and volume.